I'm remembering to record this and I have my microphone unmuted and my screen shared, so hopefully no technical glitches so far. Um, so yeah, my internet crashed yesterday. Well, it didn't crash, it went down. It's done that twice now. Came back up after a few hours, so if that happens in a permanent way, I'll probably be driving to the parking lot at Clark and lecturing from the parking lot just to get internet. So if you drive by Clark during class, wave. All right, so questions. How is PA3 going? How are people doing on this? I've had a few students come in to talk to me about code, which is great, but most people I have not heard from, so I don't know if people have, done this and are finished, or haven't started, or are hopelessly lost, or are just, plugging along and making good progress. Any questions on how to process the decision tree, how to play the game, anything like that? Oh, okay, finished it early so I can spend my time crying into the physics textbook. Excellent. That's always a good use of time. All right, so I posted an announcement yesterday about the midterms. So don't miss your midterm. Okay, it's Friday morning at 10 o'clock. It will be a Canvas quiz that will open up right at 10, and it'll be in the midterm section. But the one that actually says midterm is just a placeholder, right? So you'll see a quiz pop up. If you signed up for this section, right, you need to take it at this time. If you signed up for the afternoon section, you need to take it at the afternoon time from the afternoon Canvas shell. Okay, so those are not interchangeable, and I asked people to let me know before Thursday. Nobody has let me know, so I'm guessing that's not a problem. I'll let you do open book and open notes on this. Now, the book for this course is about 1,000 pages. I don't recommend relying on that, right? Make some good notes. You've been writing Java code for a number of weeks, at least. So the things that you don't quite remember, right? Is it public static void or public void static, right? Jot those down on your note sheet. Be ready to do some quick code writing, do some code analysis, answer some questions. Okay. I do not want you to use any outside resources other than your notes and textbook, though. Okay. So don't go to, Code for Geeks or places like that. Obviously, don't chat with other people. And I'd like you not to use, and yeah, don't use the Java documentation. You won't need it. Okay. I mean, if you take a copy of the string class and put that in your notes, that's fine. But I'm really just trying to sort of draw a fuzzy line where, on the other side of that line is things like, going to Chegg and saying, hey, quick, I need a such and such, right? Obviously. But I also don't want you using editors like IntelliJ or Eclipse or stuff that will complete your code for you. Something where you click a button and it writes a main method and things like that. Okay. VI, Nano, Notepad, Notepad++, those things are fine. All right, so I wanted to talk logistics about taking an exam on Canvas. Canvas can be tricky. Okay, I have lost a lot of stuff in Canvas. Right, I'll write an announcement and partway through something happens, and the page reloads and everything I've written is gone. So I strongly recommend while you're taking the exam, have your favorite editor, favorite legal editor available, and do your typing in there. Okay, and keep your answers in there. Don't just throw away what you've typed once you put it into Canvas. Keep a log, in a file where you're writing out the answers to each question, and then copy and paste from there into the Canvas quiz. Okay, strongly recommend that. Because if you go to hit the submit button and something times out and the page reloads and all your answers are gone, right? You want to be able to just copy and paste them back in again. So I made a totally bogus, ungraded, even though it says it's 2 points, practice midterm in here. So let me go to my student view. And let's look at how this works. So practice midterm, and this will be, you know, a real midterm down here. It'll be a quiz. All right, so let's take the quiz. And question 1, this is a sample question. We write some code to say hello, okay? So I'm gonna use VI, right? But you can use whatever you prefer. All right, so there's you know, a sample of what I might write up for my answer. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. In this window that I'm using, right, I can just highlight stuff and that will copy it. Okay, I can also come down here and I can copy. I can just highlight and the default action is to copy. Here's the main thing that's going to help you. Okay, if I paste this, it's not too bad. Okay. My 2 spaces turned into 1 space, okay, but it's not horrible. If I control Shift V to paste unformatted, everything comes out shoved against the left. That's really hard to do, right? When you're double checking your answers, that's going to be hard, and when I'm trying to grade your stuff, that's going to be hard to see. Here's a really good trick. This option over here, paragraph, change that to pre-formatted, okay? And now if I control V, it gets the indenting right, but it's double spaced, right? Not horrible, it's workable, but it's not ideal. So pre-format, and I'm going to do control Shift V, which is paste unformatted. That's all shoved against the left side. Nope. It went away from unformatted. From pre-formatted. Okay, there we go. So that looks, you know, mostly like what I had written inside VI. Okay. The point is, I don't want you spending time during the exam trying to figure this stuff out. So just spend a few minutes beforehand, figure out what your tool set is going to be. Okay. I'm guessing you might run into this in other classes. So it's a good thing to know, right? So figure that out once, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. And, you know, if I use tabs, if I like using tabs instead of spaces, right, I can copy that, and I can control Shift V, or control Shift V would make that all. Yeah, so like I say, Canvas is tricky. Select that and make it all pre-format, and now I've got tab indenting, right? And Canvas turned those into spaces, okay? But in my original file, they were actually tabs. If you say :set list, you'll see, you know, Control I wherever you have a tab, so you can see those are actually tabs. So whichever way you like to do this. While we're on the subject, let's get rid of the tabs. If you say :set expand tab, when you hit a tab, it actually gets turned into spaces by VI. Right, and that can be useful when you're pasting things in emails, or if you're relying on particular indenting other than 8 spaces, right? So that's something that might be useful to you. So mess around with that, okay? The other kind of thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take code that I've given you and do some stuff to it. So I might say, you know, here's a class and a main method, add some code to, you know, print out the command line arguments in reverse order. Okay, so what can I do? I can highlight that text. Here I do have to say copy. I can paste this as plain text. It comes out left justified. If I just paste, it comes out with the right spacing and it comes out pre-formatted. So now I can say, you know, let's add some code here. Right? Or I could go into VI and I can paste and it comes out, you know, with spaces from the code that I copied. And then I can go ahead and I can add some new code here. I can copy all of that and I can paste it into here. With a Control-Shift-V, and so now it's still nicely formatted. Okay, I'm not too worried about formatting. If you send me code that is all, you know, shoved against the left and has 3 spaces between each line, I will work with it. Okay, but it's going to make it harder if there's a problem to sort of figure out what's going on. So figure this out ahead of time. Does the HTML editor paste formatted? So I don't know what's going to happen if you paste directly into here. I mean, it's really just HTML tags. So if I go back to it, right, it doesn't have any of the line breaks and so on and so forth. But I guess if you're writing code in something like an HTML editor, you can paste it directly into there, but that might be a little strange. All right, so prepare yourself ahead of time with that, right? Sample quiz there, ungraded, but just the kinds of things that you're going to be doing, either writing code barehand and pasting it in, or copying code, editing it, and then pasting that back into your answer. And it looks like it munged up my answer when I went to look at it anyway. Oh no, there it is. That's nice. All right. Any questions or worries about that, let me know. But like I say, most of you did 222 final online with me, so we've gone through this before, and a lot of you did the 215 final, which was even kind of more bizarre. And possible midterm topics. This is kind of generic, but you know, you can glance through there. Basically, know how to set up a class, how to use the fields inside a class, setting up methods, constructors, public, private, accessors, mutexers, you know, getters and setters. Write some code, analyze code, modify code. Make sure you know about the linked list class, know about the hash map class. Okay, we use both of those in projects. Know how to implement your own linked lists. Okay, defining nodes, dealing with an empty list, moving down the list, searching, deleting, and so on. With or without a sentinel node. Know the scanner class. Mainly we've been using that to either read from system.in or from a new file. File name, which opens a file. Mostly we're using next and next line along with has next and has next line. So be comfortable with those, but there's also, you know, has int, next int, and so on. Strings, make sure you know how to work with strings. Looking at the length of it, this is length with parentheses, it's a method call. Finding the nth character by using character at, converting to uppercase and lowercase, finding a substring, comparing one string to another, seeing if two strings are equal, and so on. You've written some two-string methods. We've used a lot of two-string methods, so know what that is, right? It's got to be public, return a string, take no arguments. That's what's used when you try to turn an object into a string. Signature is just the combination of the method name, the type of return value, and the type of arguments. Actually, just the method name and the type of arguments is the signature. Try-catch blocks. We haven't really gone through arrays yet, so don't worry about arrays. Other than, string bracket bracket arg in the main program, that's a one-dimensional array. You can find the length of an array with just array name dot length, spelled with an E, not an A. We have not talked about arrays of objects and how to construct them, so that's not part of this. And then static or class methods versus non-static or instance methods and fields. Okay, and how to use those. This keyword we just kind of barely started talking about, so I'm not going to worry about that. So don't worry about this. We've talked about class extensions and the super keyword, and I won't ask you about graphics stuff because we're just starting to do that right now. So, basically, is a good guide. All right, any other questions on the midterm, about the midterm? Alright, so let's play more with Eclipse. So I got Eclipse going in the afternoon class and it's seg-faulted. How much does it affect our grade? Check the syllabus because I don't remember. Alright, I can check the syllabus. Midterm is 20% of the final grade. And the final is 30, so half your grade from those two exams. Oh, there's always a possibility of a curve, but not that I'm planning on. What is the SLP thing I just saw in the syllabus? That's probably a good topic to ask me about in office hours or email because I think everybody else in the class is on top of that. SLP is that year-long project that starts in 224, 222, and concludes in 223. But yeah, shoot me an email if this is catching you by surprise because it's something you're supposed to have been working on for the whole year. Although if you didn't do 224, 22 this year, then it's going to be a 1 quarter project. Yeah, there will be some form of SLP presentation. It's certainly not going to be in person, but we'll either do it through a Zoom, having people do screen shares, or I may have people videotape, a 5-minute presentation or something. I have to loop back with Izad and see if we want to try to do a big group thing at some time so that other people can participate or what. But there'll be some form of presenting your results. And there's the final report that gets submitted, which you can find information for, and that's the kind of final deliverable for the SLP. But hopefully a chance to present to other people. Yeah, videotaping would be cool because then you can do it in your own comfort zone, and so yeah, we'll figure that out. All right, other questions? Alright, so opening up Eclipse, this is a new installation I just made a little while ago. I'm going to say use this as the default workspace and don't ask again and launch. Now I managed to get Eclipse to segfault yesterday in the afternoon class. That was exciting. And it's got some goofiness to it, right? This is the problem with software as a living thing, is stuff that works one day might not work the next day. And I don't control Eclipse, okay? I use a version of Eclipse that's a number of years old because it works, right? I don't upgrade my software usually. But, you know, with a lot of software, you can only get to the latest version. So I'm running the latest version here because that's probably what most of you are going to download. And we'll deal with the bugs and glitches as they come up. Okay, that's kind of part of the learning experience. So, I'm going to close out the welcome window. I'm going to full screen this. And let's go ahead and make a Java project. So we'll call this GUI1. And I'm going to want to make graphical elements, okay? And I'm looking for something called swing in here, and it's not in there. So the first thing we need to do is this the latest Java version. It is for Linux, but probably not for Windows. So this is version 2020-03, which I assume is March 2020. But I think the numbering for Linux is different from the numbering for Windows, maybe. I don't know. But it's the latest one that I found for my download. Okay, cool. You have 2020-03 on Windows as well. Cool. So we'll all have similar bugs. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Help, and I'm going to say Install New Software. Okay, and work with, I'm just going to pick 2020-03, that first option up there. And under Type Filter Text, I'm going to say Swing. Okay, that's the package of graphical design classes that we're going to play with, okay? And I'm going to do Swing Designer and Swing Documentation, which, you know, I could have just done General Purpose Tools. I'm not going to worry about this one down here. And I'm just going to click through, okay? I'm going to say Next, I'm going to say Next, I'm going to accept the license agreement and say Finish. It'll install, takes it about a minute, maybe less, and then it'll ask me to restart Eclipse. And it hangs at 48% for a while, and then it jumps up, because that's what software does. Alright, restart now, yes. Okay, so we'll go ahead and restart. I'm getting all these warnings from Eclipse in the background. I'm not worried about those. Yes, so there is a version 1.14 of Java right now. I don't recommend using it for what we're doing. 1.8 is a very reliable, very stable version of Java. The newer versions have exciting features in them, but it doesn't always play nicely. And I'm going to grade your stuff using 1.8. Okay, so if you use something that's not backwards compatible, I may not be able to grade it. So I would stick with 1.8. And if you go down to Window Preferences and look at JDK, install JREs, I'm using the Open JDK for Java 8. Okay, that's the one that you know is non-commercial, but it's kind of what I came with. Yeah, it is a bummer with Minecraft modding, which I started to dabble in a little bit a few weeks ago. So yeah, that's another good reason for using 1.8. I used 1.10 for a while and actually broke some stuff. Some of the window builder stuff we're doing stopped working because the person who wrote that code wanted to make sure you had a modern version of Java, and they only checked the last digit of the version string. And when you were at 1.8, it saw an 8. When you were at 1.9, it saw a 9. When you went to 1.10, it saw a 0. And it said, that's too old of a version, try upgrading. This was software that like a lot of people were using, and it broke because somebody got kind of lazy, and instead of parsing the version number, they just used the last digit. Because, hey, when are we going to get beyond version 1.9 was probably the thinking. Um, so yeah, things break. All right, so now I've got my project GUI. It's still open. I can say File, New. Oh, I'm going to install one more thing. I don't know if you need to install this, but I've been having some crashes. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to search for Window Builder. I'm going to go ahead and install that. I don't think it's necessary. The stuff seems to work without it, but like I say, I'm getting a lot of crashes yesterday and last night, not having installed this. So I'm going to see if this works better. So install Swing and install Window Builder. Accept the license terms, finish, and tell it can relaunch. Alright, so I'm still in my project. I'm going to say File, New, and now I'm going to say Other. And if I scroll down, I'm going to see Window Builder. And if I expand that and scroll down, I'm going to see Swing Designer. And if I expand that and scroll down, I'll see J-Frame. That's what I want to make. Okay. Remember when we played with GUIs week 1 and a few days ago we were playing with J-Frames. So I'm going to make a J-Frame. And I can call it whatever I want. I'll call it my main frame. And I'm just going to click through to finish. Alright, and I have a bunch of code now. Okay, it's written a bunch of Java for me. And if I run this, I get a frame pop up. It doesn't do anything. Okay, and if I exit out, then my program terminates. Alright, so what's happening in here? I've created a class called myMainFrame, and it said it extends a JFrame. Okay, it did some imports in here. There's my public static void main as usual, and it's doing some funny stuff in here, which has to do with threads. We're going to talk about threads in another couple of weeks. But it's basically creating a new, effectively a process right inside the JVM, whose responsibility is going to be managing this visual element that pops up, right? And my main program is actually going to exit almost as soon as I start, okay? But this other thread is running that's dealing with the graphical element, okay? So how does this happen? Well, it creates an instance of a my main frame, which is this class called frame, and it says make it visible. Okay, so what does the constructor for my main frame do? Well, it says when the frame closes, we should exit. So it sets the default close operation. It sets the size of this frame. It creates a J panel, sets a border, sets a layout manager, makes it the content pane of the main frame. Whatever all of that means, we don't care about. Okay, the punchline is when I run it, I've got a J frame, and I can resize it and so on. Okay, so I could construct a J button, and I could add that J button to this J panel, and then when I run this, I would have a button sitting here in the middle. So here's one of the reasons we're using Eclipse, right? There's a piece of software called Window Builder that we can tap into to do our graphical design with drag and drop. So down here at the bottom, there's a tab that says Source. I can switch to a tab that says Design. And what I get is a visual representation of my J-frame. So let me close these out to make more space. And when I run my J-frame, right, this is how big it comes out. Now it looks different. It's got the little, Java icon up there, and it's got rounded corners because that's what my window manager is doing on my operating system. But this is basically the look and feel of the J-frame. Yeah, so Android Studio, which is IntelliJ based, has something very much like this. IntelliJ has something like this. NetBeans works like this. It's a really common methodology for designing graphical things, and it's all basically drag and drop. So if I grab a corner of this J-frame and make it bigger, right, when I run this, so it's asking me if I want to save this. Now that I changed it, I'll say yes, always save. So when I run this, the J-frame that appears is, you know, bigger. And how did that happen? Well, when I made that window bigger, the source code changed. And down here where it says set bounds, it changed the bounds to look like that. If I make this window smaller, and then I look at my source code, the bounds is a lot smaller. Right now it's saying I should position my window at 100, 100. If I move my frame over here, which I may not be able to do. I can't move my frame. But if I could, right, it would start somewhere else. Alright, so let me make my frame bigger. And this border around here tells me that I've selected the frame, and I can see that because over here in my structure window, the J-frame is selected. Now remember, there's a content pane inside here. If I click inside, I get this smaller rectangle, and my content pane is selected. And you can set all kinds of things here, right? So right now the foreground is set to this. I can go in here and use a color chooser and change the foreground. That may not show up. Let's change the background. Let's make the background orange. Right, so now when I run it, I get this disgusting yellow-orange color. And the foreground affects something else. So let's not do that. Let's go back to light gray. And you know, you can specify these things with red, green, blue intensities, or you can use predefined color names. Alright, so so let's put a button in here, right? So I'm going to click on Components, right, where it says J button. I'm going to just click and release and come in here, and I can drop down a button. And there's my segfault. Yay. Alright. And I have a theory how to get rid of this. So the first time you segfault, go back into Eclipse, close this out, come over here, and where it says My Frame, right click on that and say Open with Window Builder Editor. Okay, and go back to Design. Okay, we're back to a slightly earlier version of this because I didn't save my changes. I don't know what the foreground should be. We'll make it yellow. Alright, I'm going to save that. Let's try dropping a button again. Alright, now this is a feature, but to me it's kind of weird. My button is up here, right? And you know, I wanted it to be down here. So frames, panels, things like that are governed by what's called a layout manager. Okay, there's a lot of different layout managers. Border layout, grid layout, box layout, springs, MIGs, cards, and so on. And they all do different things, and you can take an entire online course on each one of these layout managers. This layout that we're using right now, which is called a border layout, basically lets you put things north, south, west, east, or center. Okay, and so I put my label in the middle, and so it's filling up the entire middle region, right? And I can't change that. All right, so this is a feature in some ways of thinking, but to me it's not what I want. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this button, and I'm going to get rid of this label. And I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to do something different. I'm going to come to Layouts, and I'm going to say Absolute Layout. I'm going to click on that and release. I'm going to come in here, and just by moving my mouse in here, I see this green window around and a little green plus sign. I'm going to left click. And now I have an Absolute Layout Manager controlling my placement of components. What does that mean? It means I can take a button and I can drop it wherever I want. If this happens too much, I'm going to explore other versions and suggest you use an older version. So I use Neon, which is quite old at this point, but works pretty well. Okay, so do we have a layout manager? Yes, we're still using the layout manager, so let's place a button. There's our button. Let's place another button. Let's place a text field. Let's place a label. Right? So you can just drag and drop these components and you can move them around and so on and so forth. Wow. And we can save our work frequently. There's a button. There's another button. There's a text field. Okay, Control S saves, so I'm just going to do that frequently. I'm going to try something. I'm going to close this. This is getting into superstition now. I'm going to close my project. I'm going to exit Eclipse. I'm going to go back into Eclipse. Because I'll show you the other weird thing that's happening that you may have noticed. Okay, so the other weird thing that's happening is that when I try to click on a button, it doesn't actually highlight it. I have to actually click a little bit below. And my button is actually here where this outline is. My button is actually here where this outline is. My text field is actually here where this outline is. There's an error in the placement of these on the GUI. As somebody pointed out, that error is almost exactly the height of this title bar. So it's a bug. And it seems like a really obvious bug, but it's, you know, you can find reports of this going back to the mid-teens, like 2014. So if I want to move my button, I'm going to select below it and move my button accordingly. All right, so we'll deal with this. So an absolute layout manager is nice. Now people poo-poo it. IntelliJ does not actually support an absolute layout manager, last time I checked, because they say, well, why would you want to do that? Okay, same way you can't turn off auto indenting, because why would you want to do that? Well, sometimes when you're just trying to figure out how things work and you just want to put down a few buttons in a text field, you don't want to deal with springs and attaching springs to things and figuring out how these things lay out and so on and so forth. You just want to say, give me a button right here, and there's your button, right? And you run it, and there's your button. There's your button. There's your text field. Okay? So I think absolute layout managers are nice when you're trying to learn this stuff, because you can just plop them down. You don't have to worry about them moving around or piling up on top of each other or things like that. Android Studio is a very different experience when you first start doing this. All of your buttons, they look like they're good, but when you actually run it on your phone or emulator, they're all stuck up in the upper left corner, because you have to put springs on them to move them around and anchor them to different edges of the window or the components. So anyway, I like absolute layout. If you're already familiar with some of these other layout managers, go for it. So what's happening when we're dropping these things down here? Well, code is being written for us. Okay. This was where we set the foreground and background colors. This is where it created our first button, which was called New Button, or labeled New Button, and it's called Button New Button. And this is where it's located. It's its size and position. Here's another button labeled New Button, and that's Button New Button _1. And then there's a text field called Text Field, and this is its size and location. Each of these things gets added to the content pane, which was our J panel. And the text field was set by default to be 10 columns wide. Okay, so each of these things has characteristics that you can adjust. We can come here under properties. Columns is 10. We could change that to 20. And now we should have a wider text field. Well, that didn't seem to change anything. But if I go in the source, set columns change to 20. Okay, my button, for example, I can change the text saying click here, right? And now if I look at the source, that button new button 1 has the text field click here. That's how it's constructed. So there's lots of properties available in here. You can set, background color, foreground color. You control whether stuff is left justified or centered, and so on and so forth. And if you click this button, you get advanced properties, and there's all these other things that you can set. Okay, and that's the case for all of these objects. This is unfortunate, and I had this fixed earlier this morning by closing this out. And in general, if you're finding that opening this thing doesn't give you the design window, right click and say open with window builder. Just be explicit about that. But this morning when I was doing that, it seemed to fix this issue of aligning the buttons. But that has not been fixed now. So anyway, it's something to live with. And if you look on Stack Overflow, you'll see how much this kind of thing happens with a lot of tools. And it's annoying, right? Especially if you're paying money for software, and if you're reliant on it or if you're required to use it. It's annoying when there's bugs, glitches, right? When it crashes. But sometimes that's the world that you're stuck with. So hopefully Eclipse is going to behave itself. Like I say, I use Neon, which is an older version but does not have any of this flakiness. So I'll do some experimenting later today and see if that works better or if it's a problem with Window Builder itself. Alright, so we can run this, right? And we get our window and we can click these and nothing much happens. So, but we can drag and drop components all day long. Checkboxes, radio buttons, we can have a password field over here, which when somebody types into it, well, we didn't make it big enough. Right, so when somebody types into the password field, you get the little dots so people can tell how long your password is, but not see the letters, and so on. Okay, so these are fun to look at and play with. Mostly you're going to play with components. AWT components, these are lower level. These are the things that these swing components are built on top of. So let's tie some actions into this. So click here. Buttons are easy, right? If I just double click on the button, I will jump into a section of code where I can write my action listener. Okay, and this is something called an inner class. What's happening here is normally, we would write a method called action performed, and this would be in a class that says implements action listener. Well, this is all happening in line. Okay, so this is a statement. It's saying button new button 1 add action listener parentheses, and that parentheses matches with this one. So all of this is an argument to add action listener. And what is that argument? It's the declaration of a method. Okay, it's saying I want a new action listener, and it's followed by all of this stuff, which is a public void action performed, takes an argument of type action event. And I can put code in here like system.out.println button was clicked, right? And all of this is the argument to add action listener. So I'm defining a little tiny class with a method right here in the argument to this method. Okay, So it's something called an inner class. It's a convenience, and the system is taking care of writing that for me, right? So all I had to do was double click the button, and it brought me down to this method, and I could add my code in here. And now if I run this, when I click this button, my console window says button was clicked. I didn't see anything. Alright, so now magically our buttons are lined up correctly. I'm guessing it's not going to crash until I like break it. But let's see. Alright, so more generally, right, you can right click on an object and say add event handler, and there's all kinds of event handlers that we can write for different kinds of components. So for example, I could say key pressed, key released, key typed. Let's do key typed. Let's do key pressed. Okay, so I right clicked on this object. I went to add event handler. I went down to key pressed. I'm going to left click on that. And it's going to generate a bunch of code for me, right? Add key listener, new key adapter, an override tag, which says I'm overriding part of the key listener, and I'm making something called key pressed. And I'm just going to put a print message in here. And I'm going to print out this arg0, which is being passed to this key pressed method. Okay, so I'm printing out arg0, and let's run this. And now if I'm sitting inside this widget and I press the letter A, I get a message saying key pressed. arg0 was something called an event.keyEvent, which has all of these fields associated with it, including key text equals A, key character equals lowercase a. Right? And if I hit a B, I get key code equals 66, that's an ASCII code. Key text is uppercase B, key character is B. If I hit the enter key, I get key code 10, that's a new line. Key text is enter, key character is enter. If I hit the shift key, I get key code is 16, key text is shift. And down here, key location equals key location left. Now if I hit a right shift button, it gives me the same thing, but over here, key location right. And there's more information on here, right? It's giving me a lot of information about the keys that are pressed. So this is super low level tapping into the operating system, right? And the event manager. I can press the Alt button and get an event, right? I'm down here in my code because somebody pressed the Alt button. I can press the Control button and I get this, and it tells me key text was Control. I can do Control Alt plus Alt. Well, I get an event for the Control and an event for the Alt. Right? That's because I'm in the key pressed. If I did key type, I get different behavior. I can also do key released and say when the person lets up the key, go ahead and do something. I can respond to the mouse. If you click the mouse in that box, I can respond to the mouse moving across that box or being dragged across the box. I can respond to mouse wheel changes in that box, right? And this is just a little text field. This is one of the simplest components available, but it can interact with all of these different actions, okay? Including, for example, if something occludes that text field, right? I can have this component hidden method called. When it's exposed again, I can have component shown called. All right. So this is a launching point for lots of playing around with graphical elements. So focus on your exam, right? Be ready for that. Play around with this stuff if you like. I will play with other versions and see if we can roll back to Neon maybe. And we'll mess more with this on Monday. All right, have a good rest of the day. I will see you tomorrow at 10.